No intro, let's get started. Here are 5 lies or myths that people still believe about the Aztecs. Number 1. The Aztecs come from Aztlan. For those of you who may not know, Aztlan, the land of herons, is the ancestral home and birthplace of the Aztecs. It was where they lived prior to the journey to the Valley of Mexico, which is where present-day Mexico City is located. Aztlan was their first city, their starting point, their beginning. Well, at least that's what the stories say. And according to the same stories, the Aztec god Huitzilopochtli, god of the sun and war, was the one to talk the Aztecs into leaving their home to find better land, thus sparking their long journey, which eventually ended when they founded the city of Tenochtitlan. But while it's true that Aztlan was referenced in some of the oldest archives, like the Boturini and the Aubin Codices, there's no solid proof that the Aztecs originated there. Wait a minute, please, let me explain. Number 1, no one knows exactly where Aztlan is located, not even the old texts. 2, stories were invented, some by the Aztecs themselves, in order to synchronize and contextualize mythical and political events. Sometimes, stories were written to fulfill the needs of those who were in power and justify their fitness to rule. And well, what could possibly be better justification than a deity giving them their blessing? And lastly, 3. Despite still being in dispute, some research suggests that the Aztecs may have never really migrated from a faraway land. Instead, some historians believe that the Aztecs were already in the area and that they were part of an already present tribe. The problem is, we don't know which one. Oh boy. Maybe it's a good thing that eggs are so expensive nowadays. Otherwise I would be pelted by now. No, but seriously guys, no one is saying that Aztlan didn't exist, but rather that there's no proof that it did. Not yet, at least. Science adapts to new discoveries, of course, and we would have to wait and see what kind of new research pops up. Myth number 2. The Aztecs traveled 200 years to get to the Valley of Mexico. The common belief is that once the Aztecs departed from Aztlan, they spent 200 years wandering around Mexico until reaching the valley. This is why it's always mentioned that the Aztecs were the last Nahuatl-speaking people to settle down. But scientists are just not sure about this 200-year journey. But what they do know is that Nahuatl speakers, just like the Aztecs, did their fair bit of migration. Between the 5th and the 6th centuries, proto-Nahuan, the earlier form of Nahuatl, spread from northern Mexico to southern Mexico in waves. By the 13th century, Nahuatl was the lingua franca in the valley, which means that Nahuatl speakers were abundant in the area. Nevertheless, the earliest we can trace the Aztecs, i.e. the Mexica, is the 1200s, in a location to the north of the Valley of Mexico, probably around the city of Tizayucan. This group of people, in search of exploitable resources, moved to Zampanco around 1226 CE, then to the south of Ejecatepec to mine andesite deposits. Andesite is a volcanic rock used abundantly to construct buildings like temples. But anyway, by 1272, the Mexica were widely distributed throughout the kingdoms of Tenayocan, Azcapotzalco, and Colhuacan. So, while they did arrive a bit later than the other tribes, it didn't take them 2 centuries to do so, because 2 centuries ago, there was probably no such thing as a tribe called Mexica just yet. Oh, but take this all with a grain of salt. I'm not an expert with a degree, I'm just a history buff with a lot of time in my hands. Myth number 3. When they settled in the Valley of Mexico, no one wanted them around for being ruthless, bloodthirsty warriors. This is a very common misconception. According to stories and legends, when the Aztecs settled in the Valley of Mexico, they were kicked out from every place that they tried to call home. There's this famous story about how the Lord of Colhuacan, Cocoxtli, wanted to get rid of the Aztecs that were in his territory by sending them to war against the city of Xochimilco. Cocoxli tells the Aztecs to return with the ears of their enemies as proof of their victory. But the Aztecs did better than that, and they returned with their enemies' noses instead. That way, Cocoxli wouldn't think that they increased their numbers by cutting both ears. The truth is, the real Aztecs, the Mexica, were builders and farmers, not bloodthirsty mercenaries. One of the earliest Mexica leaders that we can kind of trace is Tosquequetzli, who was born in a skill-based neighborhood of builders. They were known to construct temples, dams, canals, and chinampas, or floating gardens, for other kingdoms in exchange for safe passage. Modern researchers, like Bertina Olmedo Vera, who is an archaeologist and curator at the National Anthropology Museum in Mexico City, mentioned that they were well tolerated in the area thanks to their work. And honestly, this makes sense. I mean, do people really think that the Aztecs would have been able to build an incredible city on an island like Tenochtitlan if they were just violent warmongers? I mean, yes, they kind of were, but the status quo was already in place by the time the Aztecs gained power. They did not invent human sacrifices, skull altars, and war. They did, however, start the Flower Wars, but that's a topic for another video. Number 4. They skinned a princess and wore her skin in front of her father. I keep seeing this everywhere, but guys, this story is probably not true. To those of you who may just gotten mental whiplash thanks to the title, let me explain. There's this famous story about how, in 1323, 2 years before the supposed founding of Tenochtitlan, the Aztecs were enslaved by Culhuacan. The Aztecs asked the new Colhuac ruler, Achitomel, also written as Achitomecalt, for one of his daughters so they could turn her into a goddess, on behalf of their god Huitzilopochtli, of course. For whatever reason, Achitomel agrees, and the princess goes off to live with the Aztecs. A while later, the Aztecs invited Achitomel and other nobles to a party. So they're having the little party and everything's going really well, until a priest stepped out wearing the flayed skin of the princess. But, the Aztecs did not do this to displease the Colhuac ruler. They genuinely believed that this was the only way to immortalize the girl as a goddess. Nevertheless, Achitomel, understandably furious and distraught, forces the Aztecs out of his territory, or so the story goes. The reality is, however, that this probably did not happen. According to some historians, Achitomel was not even ruler in 1323, but instead took over much later in 1336. And by then, the Aztecs had already founded their own city. Also, the story of the Skin Princess may have come from an actual Aztec legend, which goes something like this. Long ago, the Aztecs were mercenaries for Culhuacan. To make a closer alliance, the Colhuac lord promised his daughter, a young, sweet Colhuac girl, to an Aztec prince for marriage. During the wedding, Huitzilopochtli intervenes and orders his people to flay and sacrifice the young girl instead. Once deceased, the girl returns, but as a deity by the name of Tosi, who is the personification of too angry to die. She returns as a wrathful goddess who may or may not have a strong dislike for humanity, and honestly, who could blame her, after the way she was treated? No, go for it, sis, do what you need to do. It is even said that one of her epithets was Woman of Discord. So, yeah, I think this is where the confusion started. Oh, but if that wasn't enough coincidence, the goddess Tosi was celebrated in the festival of Oxpanitzli, the Great Sweeping. In it, a woman was chosen to become Tosi, and she will be kept in a cage for 20 days before being sacrificed. Once the deed was done, she was skinned, and a priest would wear her skin, just like in the legend. So there we go, that's how it all started. Honestly though, Oxpaniztli was such a complicated and horrifying festival that it deserves its own video. Number 5. When searching for a sign from their god, they came across an eagle eating a snake on a cactus. Oh boy, I'm gonna get destroyed for this. But please, stay calm and bear with me. You know how Mexico's flag and currency have the symbol of the eagle on a cactus? Yeah, that might also be a made-up story. So let me start at the beginning. According to the lore, when the Aztecs were kicked out of Culhuacan, they wandered from island to island in Lake Texcoco. They were homeless, despondent, and barely surviving. But in 1325, they found an island in the western side of Lake Texcoco. There, they encounter a breathtaking sight. An eagle, with a snake in its talon, perched on a cactus growing out of a rock. Their god and guide, Huitzilopochtli, often took the shape of an eagle, as seen in the Boturini Codex. And so, he instructed the Aztecs to search for this exact image: the eagle, the serpent, and the cactus. When they finally witnessed this image, the Aztecs cried in relief and amazement. It was the sign they'd been waiting for so long. It meant that they could stop wandering around aimlessly and start building their new lives. Thus, they founded a city called Tenochtitlan, meaning, among the prickly pears growing on rocks, right there where they saw this vision. But just to show you how much this story has changed over time, here's a few images from multiple codices. This one is from Codex Tobar, where the eagle is eating a bird, not a snake. Codex Ramirez also shows an eagle with a bird in its talon. And here's one from Codex Mendoza, where the eagle is posing on a cactus without either a snake or a bird. The Teocalli of the Sacred War shows an eagle on a cactus holding an Atlachinoli glyph, or burning water, which is a symbol that represents war. This makes a lot of sense, as Huitzilopochtli, who is often associated with eagles, was the god of war. But back to topic. The engraving shows a cactus with prickly pear fruits, which symbolize human hearts. The word for prickly pear was nochtli, and the word for a human heart was yotl. Oh, but wait, the word for a sacrificed human heart was quanochtli, meaning eagle cactus fruit. And lo and behold, above the cactus is an eagle with the symbol for war coming out of his beak. This iconic image is also on the 50 pesos banknote, which is pretty cool in my book. But anyway, to my knowledge, the only codex that actually shows the full symbol with the eagle, snake, and cactus is the Aubin Codex. So where did this misconception start? Well, it began in the Crónica Mexicanos by Fernando Alvarado Tezozo. On page 3, Tezozo goes on to describe Tenochtitlan in many ways. He says Tenochtitlan is where the eagle stands, cries, and spreads out, where the eagle eats and the serpent is torn apart, where the fish swims in the blue water. But there was a translation error, and it should have said, where the eagle stands, cries, and spreads out, where the eagle eats, and the serpent hisses, where the fish swims in the blue water. Friar Diego Duran reimagined the legend so that the eagle represents all that is good, while the snake represents evil and sin. And because the image conformed with European heraldic tradition, Mexico at the time was like, meh, I guess I'll keep it. Like he was a stray cat or something. Nevertheless, the story was so legendary and critical for the Aztecs that it became part of Mexico's culture and was taught to kids at school for decades. In fact, it was taught for so long that people get into heated debates whenever it is discussed. I hope this video doesn't upset anyone, because like I said, I'm not an expert, but history does get embellished sometimes. Still, even though legends and truths often get mixed up, it doesn't mean that they don't hold any cultural weight. So don't worry, be proud of who you are and where you come from. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.